Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. From February 4th through the 29th, if you use this promo code, you will automatically be entered into a drawing to win a box of Magic the Gathering Unsanctioned. Also, there is another way to enter where no purchase is necessary. See the link in the description below for full details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and it's that time of the week again where we go back and look at the results from the big tournaments of the weekend. And last weekend we had Star City Games Indianapolis. There we found a Pioneer Open as well as a Pioneer Classic and a Modern Classic. We're going to be looking at the results from those events as well as some of the deck lists, with a special focus on cards from Theros Beyond Death that performed well over the weekend. Quickly though, before we get into it, just a fast reminder, if you go over to FlipsideGaming.com, you can use the Heroes promo code. Save 10% on orders over $10. And if they do restock on mystery boosters, I will put a comment in the comment section below so you can check it out, because I have had some people asking about it. When you use the promo code, they were $99, which is a very good price. So if I do see more, I will let you all know. Without any further ado though, let's get into it. All right, so let's begin with the Star City Games Open. Like I said, it was a Pioneer event, and here's your top 8. First place, as well as second place, fourth place, and 8th place was Dimir Inverter. Third place is Azorius Control. 5th place and 7th place, Mono White Devotion. 6th place, Golgari Aggro. Let's go ahead and start taking a look at some of these deck lists in the top 8 and also some that just missed. Here's that first place Dimir Inverter deck, which still is very, very popular, still very powerful in the format. I know a lot of people are a little nervous we might see a banning because this deck has performed so well. 4 copies in this top 8. Although some other events like the Classic we'll look at in just a second, the deck is nowhere near as dominant. Always good though. As you can see, the deck list hasn't changed all that much from the previous weeks. 4 copies of Inverter of Truth. You have 4 Jace Wielder Mysteries in the main, 2 Narset Parter of Veils also in the main, 1 in the sideboard. From Theros Beyond Death, you get 3 copies of Thassa's Oracle in the main, and 1 copy in the sideboard. Now, other versions of the deck that are performing well sometimes will run Omen of the Sea in the main, and sometimes you'll even find Ashiok Nightmare Muse in the sideboard. Okay, here's the third place Azorius Control deck. This is another deck that's been performing very well overall. This weekend, though, you didn't see as many copies rising to the top, but this one did get a third place finish. When you look at the deck list, again, you're going to see a lot of familiar cards here. Gideon of the Trials. That card has become a very hot Pioneer card recently, not just in this deck, but in a bunch of others. You're going to see Teferi here of Dominaria. There's 3 copies in the main here, 2 copies of Teferi Time Raveler. Let's see what's here from Theros Beyond Death. Elspeth Sun's Nemesis in the main, as well as Omen of the Sea. In the sideboard, you have Dream Trawler. Here's that 5th place Mono White Devotion deck. We'll look at Heliod Sun Crown in just a second, but you'll find 4 copies of the card that it combos with here, Walking Ballista. Notice there's also 3 copies of Gideon of the Trials in the main here. You get 1 copy of Gideon Blackblade, another copy in the sideboard, and 2 copies of Gideon Ally of Zendikar here as well. Theros Beyond Death brings us Daxos Blessed by the Sun, and the aforementioned Heliod Sun Crowned. In the sideboard, you'll find Archon of Sun's Grace, and Elspeth Conquers Death. Sometimes the Elspeth Conquers Death has been showing up in the main, though, of other successful variations of the deck. And sometimes you'll find Heliod's Intervention in the sideboard. Let's go beyond the top 8 and look at a few other decks that performed well, beginning with the 9th place Sultai Delirium deck. This deck has been wildly popular recently, and even though it didn't crack the top 8 this time, it still performed very well in the tournament. And in just a moment, when we look at the Classic results, it did really good there too. Now, these decks have consistently been running 3 copies of Jace Vryn's Prodigy in the main, and this one is no exception. 2 copies of Nissa Who Shakes the World also in the main, 1 copy of Thiemo, Collector of Tales. And from Theros Beyond Death, Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath and E2 Extinction are found in this main deck. In the side, Agonizing Remorse. I have seen some main decks that are performing well running Atris Oracle of Half-Truths. And some sideboards will have the E2 Extinction there, and I have even seen Soul Guide Lantern show up here or there out of sideboards. Here's the 12th place Lotus Breach deck, another very popular deck, didn't quite crack the top 8, but still performed really well this weekend. And you're going to find your 4 Lotus Fields here, Hidden Strings, Pour Over the Pages, Strategic Planning. Let's look at the cards that you're going to find from Theros Beyond Death. In the main, 3 copies of Underworld Breach, and in the sideboard, 1 more copy. 21st place was a Mono Black Aggro deck. This has been a pretty consistent deck ever since the Pioneer format has been around pretty much. And it still can put up decent results, although this is a little bit further down the standings this week. And as you can see here, you have Rankle, Master of Pranks, 3 copies of Pack Rat in the main here, Knight of the Ebon Legion, 4 copies of that, pretty standard in these decks. Let's go ahead and see what we got from Theros Beyond Death. In the main, 3 copies of Timurit Chosen from Death and 2 copies of Agonizing Remorse. And 1 more copy of Agonizing Remorse in the sideboard. Also, some decks are running Shadow Spear out of the sideboard. Okay, let's move on to the Star City Games Classic. Now, this is a smaller event, also a Pioneer event though, and let's look at the top 8. First place, Sultai Delirium. Second place, Mono Black Vampires. Third place, Banned Spirits, that also came in 8th place. Fourth place, Mono Black Aggro, that also came in 7th place. Izzet Soul came in 5th, and Mono White Devotion came in 6th place. Let's look at a few of the decks here that we haven't seen yet that are running cards from the newest set. Here's the Mono Black Vampires deck that came in 2nd place, a little different from Mono Black Aggro. Obviously, there are some similarities here, but this is going to have a stronger vampire theme, as you can see, 4 copies of Sorin Imperious Bloodlord right there in the main. Only 1 card from Theros Beyond Death. There's a copy of E2 Extinction in the sideboard. 5th place, Izzet Soul. Maybe not as much play as some of the other decks we've been talking about, but can put up a really nice result, as you can see here. And you're going to find your Ensoul Artifact, 4 copies of that in the main, of course the namesake of the deck, alongside 4 copies of Darksteel Citadel. Also works very well with the 4 copies of Ginger Brute here. There's 2 copies of Emery Lurker of the Lock in the main here too. Again, just 1 card from the newest set, and that is Shadow Spear. You'll find 1 copy in the main. 12th place, Mono Red Aggro. This is the version of the deck that runs Eldrazi Obligator, 2 copies in the main. I do want to point out though, if you do add up this deck list, it has 61 cards in the main, which I'm pretty sure is a mistake when Star City Games entered this, so there is probably an additional copy of something in the main that shouldn't be there. The cards you'll find from Theros Beyond Death, 2 copies of Phoenix of the Ash in the main. Alright, on to the biggest modern event of the weekend, and that's the Star City Games Classic. Now, Classics tend to be smaller events, but this is still a really good look at where the modern format is going now that those bannings occurred a few weeks back. So let's see what top 8'd here. We got first place, Jund. Second place, Jund Death Shadow. Third place, Grixis Urza Breach. Fourth place, Amulet Titan, that also came in 6th place. Fifth place, Heliod Company. 7th place, Selesnya Titan, and 8th place, Titan Shift. So you do get a lot of variations on these Titan decks, which we'll look at all these different variations in just a second. And there's some similarities between them, but some differences. Beyond that, still a fair amount of diversity. Jund back on top, probably not surprising if you've been following what's been going on Magic Online. I do think that's a deck to keep an eye on in this new meta, and let's go ahead and take a look at some of these deck lists that are using cards from Theros Beyond Death. Alright, here's that first place Jund deck. One thing to point out though, only 14 cards in the sideboard. Again, it looks like Star City Games missed something when they were inputting this deck list. But aside from that, obviously you can see most of the deck list intact. Couple things to point out. First off, there is a card from Theros Beyond Death, which we'll look at in just a second, but also notice no copies of Dark Confidant. It feels like with this new card coming in, and also of course with the addition of Run and 6 not too long ago, these decks are having a hard time of working that card into them. So without any further ado, what is that new card from Theros Beyond Death? 2 copies of Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger in the main. Alright, on to the second place, Jund Death Shadow deck, and this is very similar to the previous deck, so we won't spend a ton of time on it. One thing to point out, there are 61 cards listed here in the main. Again, I think that's a mistake when Star City Games inputted the data here. Aside from that, though, a couple big differences. 4 copies of Death Shadow in the main, 4 copies of Street Wraith in the main. One of the things that is consistent, though, 2 copies of Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger in the main. Third place, Grixis Urza Breach, the highest ranking Urza deck of the weekend. And as you can see, there's a lot of familiar cards here. 4 copies of Emery, 4 copies of Urza. 2 Mox Ambers. That has been a little inconsistent in these builds, but this deck landed on 2. Thopter Foundry, a singleton in the main, 2 copies of Sword of the Meek. You also have 4 Grinding Stations here. 2 key cards from Theros Beyond Death here, a singleton of Thassa's Oracle and 4 copies of Underworld Breach in the main. Here's the 4th place Amulet Titan deck. This deck has been very popular, performing really well on Magic Online. And it doesn't have a lot of differences compared to what this deck has looked like for a long time now, but there is a card from Theros Beyond Death which is making a big impact on these type of decks. We'll look at it in just a second. In the meantime though, 4 copies of Primeval Titan are still here, 4 copies of Amulet of Vigor. Of course, that's the card that makes this the Amulet Titan deck as opposed to some variations we're going to look at later. Here's that card I was alluding to, 4 copies of Dryad of the Elysian Grove in the main. 5th place Heliod Company. Now this is a collected company deck, 4 copies in the main, 2 copies of Finale of Devastation. However, Heliod Sun Crown does play a big role here. We'll look at that card in just a second. Also 1 copy of Walking Ballista in the main to combo with it. And like I said, the lone card from Theros Beyond Death, 4 copies of Heliod Sun Crown in the main. 7th place was Selesnya Titan, very similar to Amulet Titan, but it does not have Amulet of Vigor, which does make it play a little bit different, obviously. Again, if you're looking at cards from Theros Beyond Death, you're only going to find one. And it's 4 copies, though, of Dryad of the Elysian Grove. 8th place was Titan Shift. Now, this version of the deck runs 4 copies of Scape Shift, which you can see there in the main, which is where it gets its name from. But other than that, you're going to see a lot of familiar cards. And like the others, you're going to find 4 copies of Dryad of the Elysian Grove in the main. We'll go beyond the top 8 with Bant Snowblade coming in 14th place. This is another deck that's been performing really well on Magic Online. Keep an eye on this one. As you can see here, you got your Stoneforge Mystics, 4 of them. 1 Sword of Feast and Famine, 1 Batter Skull. That's going to be your main deck Stoneforge Mystic package there. You got your Snapcaster Mages, 2 copies, 2 Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 Teferi Time Raveler. And in the main, you're going to find 2 copies of Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath. Golgari Midrange came in 15th place, again not running any copies of Dark Confidant. However, it was running 1 card from Theros Beyond Death in the sideboard, and that card was Shadow Spear. 16th place, 1 more Titan deck for the road. This time we have Simic Titan, again not too different. And like the others, you're going to find 4 copies of Dryad of the Elysian Grove in the main. That wraps up our look at the tournament scene from the weekend. Hey, thanks for joining me as always, and until next time, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.